Hi, today I'd like to begin by discussing cells and tissues. Cells and tissues are the fundamental organizational structures of the human body and most biological systems. Understanding how cells work together to create tissues and how tissues work together to create complex behavior is a fundamental aspect of medicine, physiology, pharmacology, and basically any understanding of how the body works. I'd like to begin by talking about macromolecules, the molecular components of the cell, followed by the cellular components, which are the larger structures that work together to create cells, and finally how cells are organized and regulated throughout the body, which is cellular organization. Most of this material should be reviewed for basic college biology, but it's important because this fundamental knowledge is important to understand any aspect of medicine. So first, in biology, there's something known as the central dogma, which is DNA is converted into RNA, which is finally converted into proteins, which actually does the bulk of the work. People often theorize that the reason why there's this kind of pattern is that DNA is the blueprint of life. It's important to maintain fidelity or accuracy across generations, while proteins do the majority of work because you don't want the blueprints to be changed or exposed to many of the harms, the dangers within the environment, or even in the cellular environment. So DNA is transcribed into RNA, and RNA is translated into proteins. This transcription occurs in the nucleus, which we will talk about shortly, and this translation often occurs in the cytoplasm, or the bulk of a cell. And this translation is often initiated and catalyzed by rRNA, or ribosomes. So after understanding the basic, what they call the central dogma of biology, I like to go through cellular components. Cells are essentially are structures that are structured of related components that are covered with a plasma membrane. This plasma membrane is a lipid bilayer, or two layers of fat, which prevents hydrophobic molecules from leaving or entering without regulation. On the lipid bilayer, there are multiple channels and other proteins that contribute to maintain homeostasis, which is maintaining a constant environment inside the cell in terms of the types of proteins, the types of ions, and the types of molecules in the cell. It helps get rid of waste and recruit nutrients. Inside the cell, there's another layer called the nucleus. The nucleus is where DNA is stored. DNA is stored in structures called chromatin, which is a combination of DNA and protein bound together to allow for optimal compactness, while also allowing for transcription to occur. DNA is tremendously large. The human genome is over 6 billion nucleotides long, and it needs to be consolidated for it to fit in any structure that's within the same size of a cell. The nucleus is also a plasma membrane composed of two lipid phosphobilayers, and this controls what molecules go in and outside the cell. In addition to the nucleus, or outside the nucleus, is what is called cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is essentially, for most cells, the bulk of the cell. It's where most of the proteins are and most of the work is done. Inside the cytoplasm is the ER, the endoplasmic reticulum. This is where a lot of proteins and lipids are synthesized, and in liver cells, this is where a lot of the toxins and biological molecules we get from the environment are broken down and made less toxic and more friendly to the body. The ER is broken down into smooth ER and rough ER. And the difference, so this would be the rough ER, and this would be the smooth ER. And I'm describing with little notches on the surface of the ER. And the difference is, in the rough ER, there are multiple ribosomes embedded in the plasma membrane. This allows for protein to be transcribed and settle inside the ER, whereas the smooth ER is mostly responsible for lipid synthesis, and which does not require ribosomes, and there are no ribosomes on the surface. Typically, when molecules inside the ER are transported by vesicles, which are small spheres of lipid which contain the necessary component, protein, or structure inside, and that can be moved between the ER to something called the Golgi apparatus, and from the Golgi apparatus through the vesicles to the surface of the cell, which allows it to either embed on the surface or to be excreted into the rest of the body. So this structure is called the Golgi apparatus, which is often described as having pancake-like shape. It's essentially, it looks like multiple layers of phospholipid, multiple layers of the lipids, the phospholipid bilayers, which are in a stacked shape. This stacked shape allows for a lot of different types of conversion of proteins, such as glycosylation and different modifications of proteins to be done before they are transported outside the cell. A finer major component of cells is the mitochondria. The mitochondria are the energy factories of the cell. They create a lot of ATP, which is the energy conversion, or the energy currency of the cell, which is, we'll talk about further later on, but is a molecule that has high energy bonds, which can be broken down to fuel or energize other catalytic reactions that can't go without addition of extra energy. So a cell, in summary, is a structure is a collection of different components, such as the nucleus, the ER, the Golgi apparatus, and the mitochondria, which work together to promote life and have different functions. Cells, there's over 200 different types of cells in the body, and they all serve different functions and have different roles, and because of the different roles, often have different proteins and have specific proteins and molecules to themselves. In general, cells are often organized into tissues, which are cells that have similar fates, similar structure, and similar function, and to work together to create a function, to have a similar objective. An example of a tissue would be certain types of muscle, and tissues are organized together into organs. An example of an organ would be the liver, or also the heart, or any other system of multiple tissue types to work together to have a function. An example would be the liver, which has endothelial cells which line the ducts and the blood vessels, as well as exocrine and endocrine cells which secrete enzymes throughout the body and into the environment. Organs are organized into organ systems which serve a function and allows for different things, or is not limited in scope by being close together. An example would be the cardiovascular system, of which the heart is a major organ, but a lot of the blood vessels work together to transport oxygen to the various other cells of the body and take away waste and discarded metabolites such as CO2.